The email arrived just as my father raised his glass for a toast. "To our son Steve, who has finally found his way in life," he said, his eyes shining with a satisfaction I hadn't seen in years. My hand trembled slightly as my cell phone vibrated discreetly in my pocket. An email from an unknown sender, subject line blank. I opened it while smiling at my father's words. "Don't react. They're recording you." The blood drained from my veins. I kept the smile forced as my mother began serving dessert, my favorite chocolate cake, the one she only made on very special occasions. The same cake she made when I graduated from college, when I got my first job, when I finally got off drugs. I looked around the family dining room. The same floral wallpaper my mother had refused to change for 15 years. The same burgundy curtains that filtered the golden light of the sunset. Everything seemed normal, intimate, safe. Except for my parents. My name is Steve, and at 32, I thought I had finally regained my family's trust. After years of struggling with heroin addiction, losing jobs, lying, stealing, I thought 6 months clean and a new job as a computer technician had erased the past. But while they smiled and celebrated my recovery, someone was warning me that it was all an act. My mother tilted her head strangely when she talked about how proud she was of me. My father avoided my gaze when he mentioned how responsible I had become. Small details that, on their own, would have meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. The email had no signature, but the number came from a contact I didn't recognize. Who the hell knew enough about my situation to warn me? And why now? "Steve, are you okay? You seem distracted," my mother asked, her voice laden with that maternal concern I'd learned to distrust during my years of use. "Just thinking about how grateful I am that you gave me a second chance," I replied, testing her reactions. Her smile faltered for a split second. My father cleared his throat and quickly changed the subject to my work. They were hiding something. And if someone was recording me without my knowledge, there was only one logical explanation: they were gathering evidence. But for what? The worst part was that I had really changed. The 6 months clean were no lie. The work was real. For the first time in years, I was building a genuine life. But apparently, to them, I was still the same lying, manipulative Steve I had been before. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple family reunion turned into my parents' worst nightmare. I finished my dessert in silence, mentally cataloging every suspicious movement, every glance exchanged between them. If they were recording me, they needed something specific. A confession. A relapse. Some proof that I hadn't really changed. But what they didn't know was that my years on the streets had taught me to read people much better than they realized. And if they wanted to play dirty games with me, I knew how to play too. I pretended to go to the bathroom to buy some time and analyze the situation more clearly. Passing through the living room, I noticed something I should have noticed before: the new lamp in the corner, positioned strangely to illuminate the armchair where I always sat when I visited. The small artificial plant on the shelf, which my mother hated, but which was now strategically placed with a view of the entire dining room. My parents weren't tech-savvy people. My father barely knew how to use the remote control. But someone was helping them. I went back to the table and noticed something that made my stomach churn. They were following a script. "Steve, how's the treatment at the clinic? Have you been going to your appointments regularly?" my mother asked, her voice laden with theatrical concern. I hadn't been to a clinic in 3 months. I was clean, working, paying my own bills. But she asked the question as if she knew I would lie about it. "Mom, you know I don't need treatment anymore. I've been clean for 6 months." "Of course, honey. We know you always tell the truth," my father replied, exchanging a meaningful glance with her. That's when I understood. They weren't recording me to protect me or out of parental concern. They were trying to get me to confess something. They wanted me to admit to a relapse, a lie, anything that would confirm their suspicions that I was still the same lying addict I had been before. "Steve, are you sure you didn't take any money from my purse last week? $100 is missing," my mother continued, now in a more direct tone. I felt the anger rising, but I remained calm. That was the trap. They wanted an explosive reaction, something they could use against me later. "Mom, I work 40 hours a week. Why would I steal $100 from you?" "Just asking, son. Old habits die hard," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The blood drained from my face when I fully understood the game. My parents were building a case against me. But why? I didn't live with them anymore. I wasn't financially dependent on them. They had nothing I wanted, except my grandfather's inheritance. My grandfather had left a considerable amount of money in a trust fund that would be released when I turned 35 or demonstrated proven stability for at least 2 years. The second option would allow me to access the money sooner, and with 6 months clean, I was on track. But if my parents could prove that I had relapsed, that I was lying about my sobriety, that I was still a risk, they could contest my eligibility as executors of the will. Dad, can I see Grandpa's will again? I want to check some clauses about the trust. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stopped eating mid-bite. My father cleared his throat nervously. Why do you want to see it now, Steve? It's not urgent. Just curious. It's $300,000, after all. I want to understand exactly what the requirements are. I saw the moment when they realized I had discovered the real reason for the dinner. My mother's forced smile faltered. My father began to play with his fork. Steve, you know we only want what's best for you. If you're not really ready for this responsibility. Responsibility? It's my money, Dad. Grandpa left it to me. He left it with very specific conditions, my mother interrupted, regaining her composure. And as executors, we have an obligation to ensure that those conditions are met. Executors. They had legal power over the release of the funds. And if they could get evidence that I wasn't meeting the sobriety requirements, they could delay the release indefinitely. The worst part was that I had truly changed. I was working honestly, paying my bills, rebuilding my life. But to them, I would always be the addict who stole my grandmother's wedding ring to buy drugs 5 years ago. You don't think I deserve the money, I stated, not as a question. It's not about deserving, Steve. It's about being ready, my father replied, but his voice carried decades of distrust. That's when I got another email. This time with an attachment. It was a photo of my dining room table, taken from inside my own home. The message read, "They're in your house too. Be careful who you trust." My breath caught in my throat. If someone had installed cameras in my parents' house, they had also installed them in mine. I wasn't just being recorded during family visits. My entire life was being documented. But who was doing this? And why warn me? I looked at my parents, who were still eating as if nothing had happened, and a terrible realization hit me. They weren't the only ones involved in this. There was someone else pulling the strings, someone with access to both their house and mine. Someone who knew my routine, my habits, my history. Someone who had a lot more to gain than just $300,000. I swallowed the last spoonful of dessert and smiled at my parents, but inside I was calculating. If they wanted to play dirty with me, if they wanted to use my past against my future, I would have to remember the skills I learned on the streets. Because the one thing my years of addiction taught me better than how to get drugs was how to spot a liar. And liars always leave clues. I left my parents' house with a forced smile and a thanks for the wonderful dinner, but my mind was racing. If someone had installed cameras in my house, I needed to find out when and how. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, constantly checking my rearview mirror. 2 blocks ahead, I noticed a silver Honda Civic that had been keeping the same distance since I left my parents' house. I made 3 unnecessary turns to be sure. He followed me on all of them. I stopped at a gas station and pretended to fill up while I watched. The car drove by, but I could see the driver's profile, a man in his 40s, wearing sunglasses even though it was almost night. This was definitely not a coincidence. When I got home, I resisted the urge to search every room for cameras. If they were watching me, acting suspicious would only confirm that I had discovered something. Instead, I went about my normal routine, beer from the fridge, TV tuned to the news, phone on the kitchen counter. But as I watched the news, I mentally catalogued every item that seemed out of place. The picture frame was turned 2 degrees to the right. The fake plant I hated, but had inherited from my mother last month. The new internet router that the technician had installed for free last week, saying it was an upgrade from the company. My blood ran cold. The technician. I remembered the situation perfectly. A young guy in uniform with an internet company ID. He said they were doing free upgrades in the neighborhood to improve the speed. He stayed at my house for almost 2 hours, claiming that the signal was unstable and he needed to calibrate some equipment. I was working from home that day, completely focused on an urgent project. I let him move freely around the house while I was concentrating on the computer. More than enough time to install discrete cameras in strategic locations. I grabbed my cell phone and called the internet company. After 15 minutes on hold and being transferred 3 times, I finally spoke to a supervisor. "We didn't have any updates scheduled in your neighborhood last week, sir," he said, his voice laden with genuine concern. "And we definitely don't make unsolicited visits. You should file a police report." I hung up, my hands shaking. This wasn't paranoia. Someone had posed as a technician to install surveillance equipment in my home. But who had the resources and technical expertise to orchestrate something like this? My parents barely knew how to use the remote control. They were being manipulated just as much as I was. That's when my cell phone rang. Unknown number. "Steve? It's Marcus, your cousin. I need to talk to you in person. It's about Grandpa's inheritance." Marcus. My father's younger brother's son, a corporate lawyer in Chicago. He had always been the successful one in the family, the one everyone secretly admired and who had treated me with thinly veiled condescension ever since I started using drugs. Marcus? What a surprise. We haven't spoken in 3 years? Exactly. That's why I need to see you. There are some things about the will you need to know. Things your parents didn't tell you. My stomach turned. What kind of things? Not over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow? It's important, Steve. Very important. The call was over, but I kept staring at the phone. Marcus had never shown any interest in my life or well-being. Of all the people in my family, he was the last person I would expect to call out of concern. Unless sympathy wasn't the goal. I thought about the timeline. Marcus was an estate lawyer. He worked for a big firm, had connections, resources. And more importantly, he had always been jealous that Grandpa left most of his inheritance to me, the black sheep of the family. During my grandfather's wake, I remember hearing him talk to my aunt about how unfair it was for an addict to inherit so much money when responsible members of the family got crumbs. Now he was offering help. That night, I did a thorough search on Marcus online. LinkedIn showed that he had changed firms 6 months ago. Facebook was private, but through mutual friends I was able to see some public photos. In one of them, he was at a corporate event with a man I recognized immediately. The technician who had been at my house. My breath caught in my throat. The photo was from 3 weeks ago, a launch party for some tech product. Marcus was smiling alongside several men in suits, including the one who had invaded my privacy posing as an internet company employee. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a conspiracy. Marcus didn't just know about the cameras, he had orchestrated the whole thing. He had used his professional resources to hire someone who could install surveillance equipment without raising suspicion. He had probably convinced my parents that it was for my own good, to protect the legacy of a recovering addict. The question now was, how many other people were involved? And what exactly were they planning to do with the recordings? I decided to accept Marcus's meeting, but not for the reasons he expected. If he wanted to play, I would play too. But this time, I would be the one holding the cards. I spent the night researching surveillance equipment, detection methods, and most importantly, laws about illegal surveillance. I discovered that recording someone on private property without their consent was a federal crime, punishable by heavy fines and imprisonment. Marcus may have had a law degree, but I had something he underestimated: years of experience dealing with people who wanted to hurt me. And on the streets, I learned that the best defense against conspirators is to become a better player than they are. The next morning, I bought a discreet digital recorder and practiced a few key phrases I wanted Marcus to say. If he was conspiring against me, I would get him to confess without even realizing it. Because the difference between him and me was simple: he was playing to protect his pride and make money. I was playing to protect my freedom and my future. And when you have more to lose, you fight dirtier. As I got ready for the meeting, I received another email from the mysterious sender. He's going to try to get you to sign something today. Don't sign anything. Trust me. Whoever my anonymous informant was, they were keeping me one step ahead. But why? And how did this person know about every move in the conspiracy? Those questions would have to wait. Marcus was waiting for me, and I had a performance to give. Marcus's office was on the 23rd floor of a mirrored building in the city center. As the elevator rose, I tested the digital recorder hidden in the inside pocket of my blazer. Everything was working perfectly. I arrived 15 minutes before the appointed time, enough time to observe the receptionist and the dynamics of the place. Typical law firm, expensive furniture, intimidating atmosphere, designed to make clients feel small. Marcus greeted me with a smile that fooled no one. Over the past 5 years, he had gained about 15 pounds and lost half his hair, but he still had that arrogance of someone who believes he is smarter than everyone else. "Steve. Good to see you, cousin. How are you?" "Fine, Marcus. Thanks for setting this up. You said it was about the inheritance." He led me into his private office, closed the door, and gestured for me to sit down in a leather chair that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Steve, I'll be blunt. Your parents are worried about you." Here it was. The script I had been expecting. Worried how? "They think you may not be entirely honest about your sobriety. And as the executor of your grandfather's will, I need to investigate any allegations that could affect your eligibility." I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was smiling. He was following the script I had anticipated exactly. "Marcus, I've been clean for 6 months. I have a steady job, I pay my bills." Yes, I know. But you understand that 6 months isn't a long time, considering your history." The way he said history carried all the prejudice of a family that had never forgiven me for my past mistakes. "Your parents mentioned some inconsistencies in your recent behavior." "What kind of inconsistencies?" Marcus opened a folder on the table. Inside were printed photos, screenshots from videos. I recognized myself immediately. They were captures from secret recordings in my home. "These images suggest that you may be emotionally unstable. Look at this one." He showed me a photo of me screaming into the phone. I remembered that conversation exactly. I was arguing with my boss about an impossible project deadline. But without context, it looked like an outburst. "And this," he continued, showing me another image of me crying in the kitchen. "Your parents are concerned that you may be depressed or using again." I was crying because I had watched a documentary about war veterans that reminded me of my grandfather. But taken out of context, it looked like evidence of mental instability. "Marcus, you're showing me photos taken inside my house. How did my parents get these?" A flash of satisfaction crossed his eyes. He was enjoying seeing me confused and defensive. "They installed some security measures. For your own good, Steve. They care about you." "Security measures?" "Discreet cameras. To monitor your well-being. Completely legal, since you have a history of self-destructive behavior." My breathing quickened, but not from panic. From controlled anger. He was admitting everything, recording his own confession. "So you've been spying on me?" "Monitoring. To protect the family fortune." "Steve, $300,000 is a lot of money for someone with your past. Grandpa may have included those clauses when he still had hope for your recovery, but the reality is that addicts rarely stay clean for long." Now he was going too far, revealing more than he intended. "How long have you been planning this?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, clearly feeling in complete control of the situation. "Steve, your grandfather named me co-executor for a reason. He knew someone would need to protect you from your own bad decisions. If we can prove that you're not fit to manage that amount of money." "The money goes to whom?" "It would be redistributed among the other beneficiaries. Your Aunt Margaret, myself, your parents would receive larger shares." Bingo. Clear financial motivation, admitted on tape. "And the cameras were your idea?" "My suggestion, yes. I hired a company that specializes in family investigations. Very discreet, very professional." If you've been following this story so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will show you how a seemingly perfect plan can turn into the biggest mistake of someone's life. "Marcus, can I see the contract with this company?" He hesitated for the first time. "Why do you want to see that?" "Professional curiosity. I work with technology, remember? It must be a very sophisticated system." His ego won out over caution. He opened another file and showed me a contract with a company called Meridian Security Solutions. I could see the price. $15,000 for 3 months of discreet home monitoring. 15,000? Man, you guys are serious about this. It's worth the investment to prevent 300,000 from going down the drain. I continued reading the contract on the table. The name of the technician who had broken into my house was listed as Field Operator, David Chun. This David Chun, is he any good? The best. Ex-military, expert in electronic surveillance. Virtually invisible. Marcus was clearly proud of his elaborate operation. And the prouder he got, the more evidence he gave me. How many cameras did he install? Enough. Living room, kitchen, office. Places where you spend the most time. And you review the footage. I analyze it myself every week, looking for behavioral patterns that indicate substance use or mental instability. He leaned forward, his confidence now completely inflated. Steve, I'll be honest. The evidence we've already gathered is more than enough to contest your eligibility. You've been exhibiting erratic behavior, emotional outbursts, irregular sleep patterns. Sleep patterns. Insomnia is common among active users. You stay up until 2-3 in the morning. Sometimes you walk around the house with no apparent purpose. I stayed up late working on freelance projects to earn extra money. But to him, it was evidence of drug use. Marcus, do you really believe I'm using again? He looked at me with that condescending pity I hated. Steve, statistically, 90% of heroin addicts relapse within the first year. You may be trying hard, but the chances of long-term success are slim. It's better for everyone if the money goes to people who can use it responsibly. There. He had confessed not only to the conspiracy, but also to his true motivations. It wasn't family protection, it was greed disguised as concern. So you've already decided I'm going to fail? We've decided to prepare for the most likely reality. I rose from my chair, feigning defeat. Marcus, you're right. Maybe I'm not ready for this responsibility. His eyes flashed with anticipated victory. You can sign a voluntary waiver. It would make the whole process much simpler for the family. He pushed a document across the table. A formal waiver of rights to the inheritance, already prepared and waiting only for my signature. Did you bring this with you? It's always best to be prepared, Steve. I looked at the document, pretending to consider it. In fact, I was memorizing every word, every clause he had included. Can I take it home and think about it? Of course. But don't take too long. The more time passes, the more problematic evidence we may uncover. It was a veiled threat. If I didn't sign voluntarily, they would increase the pressure. I left the office with the resignation letter in my hand and the tape recorder in my pocket full of incriminating confessions. Marcus thought he had intimidated me into submission. But as I rode down in the elevator, I was already formulating the second phase of my plan. If they wanted to play dirty, I was about to show them that I had learned a lot more on the streets than just how to get drugs. I had learned that predators always underestimate their prey. And Marcus had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. The next morning, I called Marcus. Cousin, I've decided to sign the waiver. You were right about everything. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice as we set up another meeting at his office to formalize the decision. He could barely hide his excitement at having manipulated the unstable junkie into voluntarily giving up $300,000. But this time, I wasn't going alone. 2 hours before the meeting, I parked in front of Marcus's building and called my contact at the internet company, the supervisor who had confirmed that no technician had been sent to my house. Sir, we've traced the unauthorized equipment installed in your home. The signal is being transmitted to a private server registered to Meridian Security Solutions. Perfect. More evidence. And there's more, he continued. We've discovered that someone has been remotely accessing your connection for weeks. They're downloading files from your personal computer. My blood boiled. Not only were they spying on me, they were stealing my personal data. I arrived at Marcus's office 15 minutes early, but this time I brought company, Detective Rodriguez from the Cybercrime Division and my lawyer, Sarah Chun. They waited downstairs while I went up. Marcus greeted me with that condescending smile of someone who thought he had won. Steve, I'm glad you see reason. This is for the best. Marcus, before I sign, I need to clear up a few things. You mentioned yesterday that you hired a company to monitor me. Yes, for your own good. Why do you ask? I discreetly activated the recorder on my cell phone. A second recording never hurts. I just want to confirm the details. Meridian Security Solutions, right? That's right. David Chun has done an exceptional job. 15,000 well spent. And they installed cameras in my house without my knowledge. Marcus laughed, relaxing completely in his chair. Steve, you signed a consent form when you visited your parents. Remember? That document about family security measures? Technically, you authorized the monitoring. My stomach churned. He was right. I had signed a piece of paper during dinner, thinking it was just a formality about home insurance. In fact, it was authorization for surveillance. Very clever, Marcus. Thanks. Now let's sign this waiver and get this over with. That's when my cell phone rang. Detective Rodriguez. Marcus, excuse me. It's an important call. I answered in front of him, putting it on speakerphone. Mr. Steve? This is Detective Rodriguez. We're on the ground floor of your building with a search and seizure warrant for Marcus Thompson. Can you come down, please? Marcus's face drained of color. Warrant? What are you talking about? I hung up and looked at him with a calmness I didn't feel. Marcus, yesterday you confessed to hiring illegal surveillance, accessing my personal data without authorization, and conspiring to fraudulently deprive me of an inheritance. It's all on tape. That's not legal. Actually, it's perfectly legal. We were in a public place, you confessed voluntarily, and I was defending myself against a criminal conspiracy. I pressed play on the recording from the previous day. His own voice echoed through the room. I hired a company that specializes in family investigations. $15,000 for 3 months of discreet home surveillance. You tricked me, he shouted, jumping up from his chair. No, Marcus. I just used the same tactics you did. The difference is that mine were legal. At that moment, Detective Rodriguez entered the office with 2 agents. Marcus Thompson? You're under arrest for invasion of privacy, unauthorized access to personal data, conspiracy, and will fraud. As they read his rights, Marcus looked at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. You planned all this. Actually, Marcus, you planned all this. I just documented it. That's when I received another email from my mysterious informant. Congratulations. Now look in the right drawer of his desk. While the police handcuffed Marcus, I approached the desk. In the drawer was a folder marked Project Steve with documents detailing the entire conspiracy, timelines, budgets, even scripts for conversations my parents were supposed to have with me. But what shocked me was the last page, a preliminary agreement transferring the administration of the estate to Marcus in the event of the proven incapacity of the original beneficiary. He wasn't just trying to make me give it up. He was planning to have me declared legally incompetent and take full control of the money. Detective, you'll want to see this, I said, handing him the folder. Rodriguez flipped through the documents and whistled softly. This changes everything. This isn't just invasion of privacy, it's fraud on a federal scale. Marcus was being led away when he shouted one last time. You think this is over? His parents still have the recordings. They can still prove you're unstable. I smiled for the first time in days. Actually, Marcus, about that. I pulled another document from my briefcase, a court order I had obtained the night before, based on the evidence I already had. All the recordings have been confiscated as evidence of a cybercrime. And my parents? Well, they'll have to explain to a federal judge why they participated in a conspiracy against their own son. The look on Marcus's face when the elevator doors closed was one I would remember forever. It was the exact moment he realized he had completely underestimated his victim. As I walked out of the building, my cell phone rang. It was my mother. Steve? The police are here. They want to talk to us about the cameras. What's going on? Mom, you're going to have to answer for your choices. Just like I've had to answer for mine all these years. I hung up and looked at my lawyer. Sarah, how long could Marcus get? With the evidence we have? Between 5 and 10 years. What about the inheritance? Now that the conspiracy has been exposed, There's no question about my eligibility. The money is mine by right. But the real victory wasn't the $300,000. It was proving that the unstable addict they had so despised had become smarter, more strategic, and more determined than any of them could have ever imagined. And the mysterious informant? Well, I discovered his identity the following week. It was David Chun, the technician Marcus had hired. Apparently, he had recorded all his conversations with Marcus as legal protection, and when he realized the scale of the operation, he decided he didn't want to be complicit in destroying a family. Sometimes even mercenaries have a conscience. 3 months later, I was sitting in the same coffee shop where it all began, but this time on the other side of the table. Marcus was wearing an orange prison uniform, handcuffed and escorted by 2 guards. His once arrogant eyes now carried the weight of someone who had discovered that the world has real consequences. "You got what you wanted," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Actually, Marcus, I got something much better. I got justice." The trial had been a spectacle. With the recordings, documents, and confessions, the prosecutor built such a solid case that even the best criminal lawyer Marcus could hire couldn't save him. 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy, willful fraud, invasion of privacy, and extortion. But Marcus wasn't the only one who paid. My parents faced lesser charges as accomplices, resulting in 2 years of probation and a hefty fine. More important than the legal punishment was the social punishment. The story spread throughout the small community where they lived. The man who had always prided himself on being a respectable patriarch was now known as the one who betrayed his own son for money. My mother called me only once after the trial. "Steve, we just wanted to protect the family." "Mom, you wanted to protect the money. Family would have been believing in your own son's change." She cried on the phone, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt sorry for the boy who grew up thinking he would never be good enough for his own parents. That boy deserved better. David Chun, the real hero of this story, received full immunity in exchange for his testimony. I later found out that he had lost a brother to a heroin overdose and that, seeing Marcus conspire against someone in recovery, he decided he would not be complicit in destroying a second chance. "Her story reminded me of my brother," he told me after the trial. "He never had the opportunity you had. I wasn't going to let them take that away from you." Sometimes angels come disguised as electronics technicians. The inheritance was released in full 3 weeks after the trial. $300,000 that represented so much more than money. It represented validation, freedom, and proof that my grandfather had believed in me when no one else did. But using the money wisely became my obsession. Not because of external pressure, but because I wanted to honor the trust my grandfather had placed in me. I invested $100,000 in my education, completing a cybersecurity degree I had always dreamed of pursuing. Ironically, the experience of being a victim of illegal surveillance gave me a unique perspective on digital protection that impressed professors and classmates alike. Another $100,000 went into an emergency fund and conservative investments. I learned on the streets that financial security isn't a luxury, it's a basic necessity for anyone trying to stay sober. The last $100,000? I created a fund to help people in recovery rebuild their lives. Job training programs, legal assistance, temporary housing. Things I wish I had had when I was coming out of addiction. The first person I helped was a 40-year-old woman named Lisa, who had been clean for 8 months but couldn't get a job because of her criminal record. Today she manages 3 of our recovery homes. "Steve, you gave me more than a chance," she told me last Christmas. "You showed me that the past doesn't define the future." It's funny how life works. Marcus tried to use my past as an addict to destroy me. He ended up teaching me that that same past could be my greatest strength in helping others. 6 months after the trial, I moved to a new city. Not out of fear or shame, but because I wanted to start fresh, without the weight of expectations and prejudices from people who only knew me as the addict in the family. My new job in cybersecurity pays more in a month than I made in 3 at my old job. But the real wealth isn't in the paycheck, it's in the trust my boss has in me, in the important projects I'm entrusted with, in the respect of my colleagues who see me as just Steve, the data protection expert. No one at work knows about my past with drugs. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I finally achieved what I've always wanted, to be judged for who I am today, not who I was yesterday. A few weeks ago, I received a letter in prison. It was from Marcus. "Steve, I've spent these months thinking about what you said. You were right about everything. The money was never about protecting the family. It was about my ego being hurt because I wasn't Grandpa's favorite. I apologize not because I want forgiveness, but because you deserved a better family than us. I didn't respond to the letter. Not out of anger, but because some wounds heal better in silence. Marcus needs to find his own redemption, just as I found mine. The most powerful lesson I learned wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about transformation. For years, I let people define me by my worst moment. I let the addict I was 5 years ago be more real than the man I was becoming. Marcus and my parents made the same mistake. They saw only the past and completely missed the present. And in trying to keep me stuck in the old version of myself, they got stuck in their own versions: the greedy lawyer, the betrayed parents, the exposed manipulators. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see a man who faced the worst betrayal possible, that of his own family, and came out stronger. I see someone who turned pain into purpose, humiliation into motivation, isolation into independence. And when old doubts try to whisper that I didn't deserve the inheritance, that I wasn't good enough, that I would always be just a recovering addict, I remember Marcus in prison, my parents facing the consequences of their choices, and David Chun risking his career to do the right thing. The truth is, people who underestimate us do us a huge favor. They give us the perfect motivation to prove them wrong. Last month, I opened the second recovery center. At the opening ceremony, I looked out at the crowd, former addicts who are now productive employees, reunited families, people who have discovered that second chances really do exist, and I finally understood the true legacy my grandfather wanted to leave behind. It wasn't the $300,000. It was the opportunity to prove that change is possible, that people can grow, that the past doesn't have to be a prison. If this story of family betrayal and overcoming adversity touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We share stories of people who turned their greatest betrayals into their greatest triumphs, proving that sometimes being underestimated is the best thing that can happen in someone's life. The last time I heard from Marcus, he was serving time in a federal prison, participating in a vocational rehabilitation program. My parents moved to another state, away from the judgmental eyes of the community. Me? Well, tomorrow we're opening our third recovery center, and I finally understand that the best revenge isn't destroying those who betrayed us, it's building something so meaningful that the betrayal becomes irrelevant. Because in the end, those who live obsessed with tearing others down never build anything lasting. But those who turn pain into purpose leave a legacy that transcends any revenge.